Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute, a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. I'm Alan Sanders.
And I'm Walt Murray.
And no guests this week. We'll have some starting in next week, but our film for season 1, if you just are flipping around and got us in the wrong order, we're actually breaking down Young Frankenstein.
No, that's the right order.
It's the right order.
Yes.
If they came in minute 3, they don't know what we're doing.
True. Well, do we know what we're doing?
No, we don't know what we're doing, but we're having fun doing it. All right, so we are continuing the credits. We're looking at the film and the opening. We're in minute number 3 now, and it starts off with a reminder of production designer Dale Hennessy and set decorator Bob DeVestel. The next credit we then roll into will be the guy who is responsible for creating the iconic titling. Anthony Goldschmidt came up with the title and the graphic design, Young Frankenstein.
That's the perfect graphic to help set the tone for this movie and to title it the way that that they wanted to show. This is going back to the original 1931. This is going back to have the feel and tone of the original Frankenstein.
Of course, to see the use of cracked and broken stone, giving you the idea that you're about to see a cracked and broken version of the Frankenstein story take place on
and
screen.
A whole bunch of cracked and broken people.
Also on the same title, a name you and I are very familiar with because he's cast a handful of movies that you and I both like. Mike Fenton and Jane Feinberg cast this movie.
Yeah, and Mike Fenton cast one of my favorites, or probably my favorite, Slapshot, but also he has like 280 other films and TV shows, including Aliens, Back to the Future, Inner Space, Sharknado 2. That he's cast.
Well, I don't know if that really counts as
not
as
in
a
the
good
same
credit.
category.
I do know he's worked with Spielberg a lot. E.T., Poltergeist. He's done things like Superman 3. He helped cast that movie. Just a bunch of movies. Mike Fenton seems to be all over the place and all different kind of characters or films that he's worked with. So there you go, working early in his career on a Mel Brooks picture.
And he does work in, like I said, in several of the Mel Brooks movies.
This one, I actually wanted to take a second and look at one of the names in this list. We've got some of the people who did makeup and wardrobe. There's a name that should look somewhat familiar, at least by last name, in women's wardrobe, Phyllis Garr.
I thought this was probably one of the oddest names to come up because that is Terry Garr's mom.
Terry Garr's mother was basically responsible for picking out her wardrobe attire for the character of Inga, the lab assistant.
And I would kind of think that most of the stuff that she wore, her mom would be saying, "You are not leaving the house wearing that." And here's Mrs. Garr with.
Well, it's a different kind of world in Hollywood.
It is.
It also was the 70s.
It was the 70s, and I'm assuming they're making a lot of money. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just glad she wasn't in a leisure suit. So.
Yeah, disco and cocaine.
Yeah, there's a lot of both.
So yeah, Phyllis Garr apparently had been invited. I didn't realize that Terry Garr was basically born into a Hollywood family, so she had not known life outside of performance, really.
No, and I assume that Mrs. Garr had probably been around the block a few times in Hollywood as well, so this was nothing new.
Moving along to the next round of credits here as we are breaking down this opening of Young Frankenstein before we actually get into any of the action. We have a title card that I think is really important for us to break down this story. We've talked already in the last couple of minutes about how Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks wanted to pay homage to the original Universal Monster Pictures Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Ghost of Frankenstein. Wanted to really capture the look, the feel. Obviously, they're retelling the story with a twist and a more comedic edge. But apparently Mel Brooks wanted to try to find some of the equipment used in the original Boris Karloff version of Frankenstein.
Yes, and they were able to find it in, and I'm going to kill this name, Kenneth Strickfaden's garage. He had been the original person to put the lab together in that movie and was not credited. So the deal was, if we can use that equipment, you will get credited in this movie for your contribution.
Yeah, so special thanks right here on this slide. Special thanks to Kenneth Strickfaden for original Frankenstein laboratory equipment. And to think about, this guy created in early 1930-31 when they went to film it, because it came out in 31, so 1930, came up with all of this gear with all of the lightning and electrical bolts and charges and discharges, came up with all this gear, never got credited by Universal. And when they were getting ready to dismantle the sets and do a whole bunch of renovation, he basically said, well, what are we doing with all this equipment I built? And they're like, well, we're going to throw it away. He goes, well, can I have it?
Yeah, so it goes
and he
home
was
with
just
him.
storing it in his garage. 40 years later, he's got all this gear in his garage.
How bizarre is that?
But Mel Brooks convinced him, said, hey, you know what? We'll give you screen credit if you let us borrow. So we are actually using the same gear that was used in the Boris Karloff picture for the first Frankenstein film.
Well, and it really lends to that authenticity that they were looking for and the real Frankenstein feel. I mean, it's the Frankenstein stuff. I mean, that's just amazing.
And the fact is, when we, and again, not to go jump ahead in minutes, because if you haven't seen the story before and you are only living it 1 minute at a time, there's a kind of a cool connection with Gene Wilder's character and Victor Frankenstein, who would have been back, with this same equipment. So it's the equipment being handed down from one side of the family, continuing down that line to the grandson.
Yeah, passing down the insanity baton, if you will.
Yeah, apparently. All right, let's see. What else do we got here as we go through our opening credits and and we're almost done with these opening credits. If you haven't been paying attention, in the background, the model of the castle on the hill, we've been slowly panning in. We've been noticing it's raining. It's also getting a little bit lighter as though we're getting closer. We're picking up more details, the spires, the steep roof lines, all of the long
cart path up the
I guess
mountain.
it's just a cart path to go all the way up to the top of the mountain to where the castle is perched atop.
It definitely gives you an ominous feel for where you're headed.
Now, director of photography gets his own screen here, Gerald Hirschfeld. In some of the early dailies, Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks were sitting there, and Gene Wilder said, this isn't getting the feel I thought we were going to get. And Mel Brooks says, well, what do you mean? He said, well, it doesn't feel like the Frankenstein movie. And Gerald Hirschfeld is sitting there saying, oh, is that what we're going for? So apparently neither one of them had initially told their director of photography, oh, by the way, here's how we want to try to light some of the scenes. This is what we're going for.
The whole movie is going this direction.
Thankfully,
don't bother telling the guy in charge of photography.
Thankfully, looking at the dailies, they caught it pretty early on, and Hirschfeld made some tweaks with lighting and some tweaks with camera placement and what they were going to do with camera motion that would have been more conducive of the 1930s style of filmmaking rather than the 1970s.
Which had to be a challenge because it had changed significantly. And one of the comments that one of the reviewers had made at the time was most of the shots are either taken from a distance with a lot of detail in the background, or they're very, very, very close up. You don't have much panning in. Panning around. You don't have much pulling in or pulling out. The cameras are pretty stationary, so they had to get good shots. They had to get them right the first time, and so I would imagine he had a pretty tough job. And working with those two visionaries to get everybody on the same page had to be a bit of a challenge.
Now, during the filming of this, and because they knew they wanted to create that older style of filmmaking, which there were a lot of medium to wide shots, a lot of master shots where you would just roll the camera for 10 minutes of dialogue and then go shoot it again and then go shoot it again and then cut it that way with very few close-ups. Mel Brooks saying later, I would have to go in for the close-up simply because I couldn't finish the shot without everybody cracking up. I would have to then go in for a close-up or you'll see in some instances freeze the frame and it's obvious nothing's moving, but I had to hold the freeze frame before I faded out because I didn't have anything left because everything was ruined from everybody cracking on camera.
I'm not surprised.
One of the things Mel Brooks did, though, with Gene, even though here's Gene learning his lines, he's the lead, he's on camera, he would explain what he was doing shot for shot, and Mel Brooks later said, because I knew down deep Gene Wilder was going to try his hands at directing someday, so I figured, hey, here's something we've worked on together from story to bringing it to the actual screen. I'm going to give him some directing tips along the way while he's on the set. And he would say something like, see how I just didn't do a close-up? Don't make that mistake when you do your movie.
Yeah, well, good advice.
And now we move to our final, as we wrap up minute here, number 3. We finally get into actual footage being shot in the courtyard of the castle on this rainy, stormy night.
Yeah, and again, the tone is set. You have the thunder and lightning. You have the darkness. You have that ominous feel of the Frankenstein movie as we head in towards the front door.
Now, we do pan past some things in the courtyard that we'll see again in just a little bit as the movie unfolds, but we get one of your final credits as to screen story and screenplay to Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, who did work together. Mel Brooks wanted Gene to get the first name because he said, really, it was your idea. Mm-hmm. We hammered it out together, but it was your idea. And then based on characters in the novel Frankenstein by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley.
Yeah, and that is a pretty amazing credit there, considering what they're doing. They're making a comedy, but we're going to give credit back to the person who invented the monster, that universe, really.
So as we wrap up this third minute and start moving into minute number 4, we're going to finally start moving into the film itself. We're seeing actual footage here. This is actually the same footage that we'll see when Gene Wilder first pulls in to the castle when he finds out that he has been bequeathed the castle from his great-grandfather's will. So you'll see almost the exact same tracking shot, only instead of it being in the rain, it's a foggy evening, but it's almost that same shot that we see here of the archway leading up from obviously that walkway or that cart path up the hill and cuts across to the front doors. And then this one will continue into the next minute, which we'll get to tomorrow, onto a window and slowly push in that eventually gets us inside the room.
Yeah, and there's one more name that'll pop up that is very interesting, and I'm looking forward to getting that, but that will come right at the first of minute 4.
All right, so anything else that you want to add for minute number 3 as we are going our way through these opening credits of Young Frankenstein?
No, I will say this. Going through those credits, I usually kind of, eat popcorn and drink a Coke while the credits are rolling. But it is interesting to see the amount of talent they brought to the table for this movie.
And to realize this was one of their earlier projects, to see all
Absolutely.
the films that a lot of these folks went on to work on since.
Yeah, it is a crazy talented crew that put this together.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this minute, but let's go ahead and give another special thank you to Adam and Brad of Gutterballs, that's gutterballs.tv, who first analyzed a movie 1 minute at a time, and to Pete and Alex of the Star Wars Minute, you can find them at starwarsminute.com, who really created this idea of the podcast 1 minute at a time, breaking a film down or a franchise, or in this case, we're looking at a particular actor, Gene Wilder, and looking at the films of Gene Wilder, this Wilder ride, we're calling it, getting Wilder by the minute.
Well, and we also want to say thank you real quick to the people who have gone out and gone to iTunes or other places and rated us. We already have quite a few ratings. We already have some comments. Thank you for taking the time to do that. We really, really do appreciate it. We read your comments there, and we'll try to engage with you as much as we can. But if you haven't yet and you're enjoying what you're hearing, please go out to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating if you would. We'll grovel a little bit and ask you to do that. And it just helps our podcast get the visibility that we need so that when people are looking for us, they can find us. And if you could make a quick comment, we'd appreciate that too.
And Walt and I love getting involved with our audience and our listeners via our social media outlets. If you want to check us out on our Facebook page, it's The Wilder Ride on Facebook. We actually have a listeners group as well. If you really want to get down in the deep in the weeds and have some fun discussions, we've got that group that you can apply to. We also have a Twitter account, The Wilder Ride, and everything all tied together at our website, thewilderride.com.
I can't remember what I'm supposed to say there. I got lost in the weeds.
Anything you want to say on the way out?
Well, hey, thanks again for listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah, tune in tomorrow, minute number 4, as we really start to push into the, I don't know if it's the sitting room, the parlor, but certainly a lit fireplace and a strange piece of furniture in front of that fireplace.
Piece of furniture.
And it's Frankenstein.
That's Frankenstein.
Frankenstein?